I went to Bali with my husband, my sister, and his parents. He said he needed some air, so I followed him secretly. I found him in a chapel, my sister in a white dress holding his hand. "Does she know?" he asked. My sister whispered, "Relax." She insisted. "She's too naive." His mother chuckled, "She won't suspect a thing." I turned around calmly. By the time they got back, I'd gone and cancelled the entire trip. Flights, hotel, even their return tickets. The chapel window framed them perfectly. My husband Samuel with his hand wrapped around my sister Zoe's, both illuminated by candlelight as she stood wearing a white dress. 3 years of marriage, countless sacrifices, and endless support had led to this moment of ultimate betrayal. I felt my heart turning to stone as I watched them, my body frozen outside that small Balinese chapel while my world collapsed around me. Just 2 weeks earlier I had been in my bakery, Sweet Crumbs, folding the day's profits into the vacation fund envelope. My small bakery in Springfield wasn't flashy, but I had built it from nothing after working double shifts at a local diner for 5 years. The display cases filled with cinnamon rolls, sourdough loaves, and my signature honey lavender cookies represented years of 4 a.m. wake-ups and flour-covered aprons. The locals loved my baked goods, and I had finally found stability after years of struggle. Samuel hadn't found his footing yet. 3 years into our marriage he was between jobs again, the 4th time since we'd said "I do." His marketing degree gathered dust while he talked about finding his passion. I never complained when I covered our mortgage, groceries, utilities, and his parents' occasional loans. Love meant support, I told myself, ignoring how one-sided that support had become. "Madison, you work too hard," Samuel would say, massaging my shoulders as I reviewed the bakery's accounts late at night. "Someday I'll take care of you." He'd kiss the top of my head and I'd believe him despite the growing stack of rejected job applications in his desk drawer. Our attempts to start a family had become another source of silent heartbreak. Month after month of disappointment had culminated in a doctor's appointment that still haunted me. "Your fallopian tubes are blocked," the gynecologist had explained gently. "Natural conception will be extremely difficult." Samuel had squeezed my hand in the sterile office, but something in his eyes had shifted. A flicker of resignation I couldn't unsee. That night I'd cried in the shower so Samuel wouldn't hear me. The word infertile felt like a brand on my skin, though Samuel assured me he married me for me, not for potential children. Still, I caught him watching families in parks with a longing that cut me to the core. The Bali trip was my desperate attempt to breathe life back into our fading connection. I'd been squirreling away extra money for months, foregoing new baking equipment and working additional catering jobs on weekends. The travel brochures promised romantic sunsets, spiritual temples, and pristine beaches. Everything we needed to reconnect. "Bali? Are you serious?" Samuel's eyes had lit up when I surprised him with the tickets. "How can we afford this?" The genuine smile that spread across his face made all the extra hours worth it. For a moment he looked at me the way he had when we first met, with admiration and love instead of the vague disappointment that had become his default expression. "I've been saving," I'd explained. "We need this, Sam. Just us, reconnecting." His parents had invited themselves along almost immediately after hearing about our plans. Christopher and Grace Lawrence lived 30 minutes away and inserted themselves into our lives with alarming regularity. Grace's thinly veiled criticisms about my housekeeping, cooking, and inability to give Samuel children had become a constant backdrop to family dinners. "We've always wanted to see Asia," Grace had announced over Sunday dinner at their house. And Samuel shouldn't have to navigate a foreign country without his father's guidance. Christopher had nodded sagely, as though Samuel were 17 instead of 33. Before I could object, Samuel had beamed at his parents. "That would be amazing. Madison won't mind, she loves planning things." I'd swallowed my disappointment with a forkful of overcooked roast. Of course, I'd managed, watching my romantic getaway transform into a family vacation. Then came the real surprise. My phone had rung late one Tuesday evening as I was closing the bakery. Zoe's name flashed on the screen. "Madison. Samuel mentioned you're all going to Bali," she'd said, her voice bubbling with uncharacteristic excitement. My younger sister and I had never been particularly close. While I had built my business, Zoe had floated between college majors and relationships, always landing on her feet with our parents' financial cushion. Yes, in 3 weeks, I'd replied, counting inventory while cradling the phone. I absolutely have to come. I just finished my travel photography course, and Bali would be perfect for my portfolio. Without waiting for a response, she'd added, I already talked to Sam and he thinks it's a great idea. My hand had frozen midway through counting pastry boxes. Samuel had discussed our trip with my sister before mentioning it to me. An uneasy feeling had settled in my stomach, but I dismissed it as exhaustion. I'll need to rework some reservations, I'd said hesitantly. It was initially just going to be Sam and me. Oh, don't be selfish, Maddie, Zoe had laughed. It'll be so much more fun with everyone. I'll even help you plan activities. When I'd brought up Zoe's request to Samuel that night, his enthusiasm had been immediate and overwhelming. That's perfect. Your sister is so fun, she'll keep things lively. And you two need more bonding time. More surprisingly, when I'd reluctantly informed Grace and Christopher about Zoe joining us, their reaction had caught me off guard. Grace, who normally regarded my family with thinly veiled disdain, had clasped her hands together in delight. Zoe. How wonderful. Such a vibrant young woman. We'd love to have her along. Christopher had nodded vigorously, adding, She certainly brings energy to a room. Standing outside my bakery the following Sunday, I'd overheard Grace on the phone, her voice drifting through the open window of her parked car. Everything's falling into place, she'd been saying. Zoe's coming too. Yes, she's perfect. Madison has no idea. When Grace had spotted me approaching, she'd quickly ended the call and greeted me with an artificial smile. Madison. Just finalizing some Bali details. This trip is exactly what everyone needs. Something in her tone had sent a chill through me, but I'd brushed it aside. After all, what could possibly happen on a family vacation that I'd worked so hard to create? The Bali humidity hit me like a wall as we exited the airport. Lush greenery and the scent of incense surrounded us, but my excitement was tempered by an unsettling feeling I couldn't shake. Our driver navigated narrow roads lined with temples and rice fields, eventually pulling into our resort, a collection of private villas nestled among tropical gardens. I'd spent months researching the perfect place, wanting a balance of privacy and luxury that wouldn't completely drain my savings. This is breathtaking, Madison, Samuel said, squeezing my hand as we entered our villa. For a moment I felt the validation I'd been craving. My hard work had created this moment. The moment was short-lived. As we unpacked, Samuel's phone chimed. Zoe says their villa has an amazing view of the sunset. We should head over before dinner. Just like that, our private moment evaporated. During our welcome dinner that evening, I noticed the first strange interaction. Samuel leaned across the table toward Zoe, whispering something that made her burst into laughter. Inside joke, Samuel explained when he caught my questioning look. From that show we both like. What show? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Oh, you wouldn't enjoy it, Zoe replied, twirling the straw in her cocktail. Too much sci-fi for your taste. She and Samuel exchanged glances that lasted a beat too long. Strange, considering Samuel had never mentioned watching shows with my sister. When had they even had time for that? The next morning I woke early, hoping to enjoy the sunrise with Samuel. His side of the bed was empty. A text notification lit up my phone. Went for an early hike with Zoe. Back for lunch. This became a pattern over the next 3 days. I'd plan activities, a cooking class, a temple visit, a sunset cruise, only to have Samuel and Zoe announce they'd already made arrangements to do something else. You should join us, Samuel would offer half-heartedly, knowing my motion sickness would prevent me from joining their scooter adventures or that my schedule was already filled with the couple's massage I'd booked weeks ago. One afternoon I found myself alone with Grace by the infinity pool while Christopher napped in their villa. I attempted conversation, mentioning a local textile market I thought she might enjoy. That sounds rather dull, Grace replied without looking up from her magazine. Zoe found the most fascinating temple yesterday. Apparently there's a ceremony for fertility and continuing bloodlines. She has such an eye for meaningful experiences. Before I could respond, Zoe appeared poolside in a new sundress, her hair still damp from a shower. There she is. Grace's entire demeanor transformed, her face lighting up. Darling, tell Madison about that temple you visited. Oh, it was nothing special, Zoe replied with a casual wave. Samuel thought it was fascinating though. He's always been interested in those deeper spiritual connections. My husband had never once expressed interest in spirituality during our 3 years of marriage. That evening, during dinner at the resort's beachfront restaurant, Christopher raised his glass in a toast. To family, he announced, his gaze lingering meaningfully between Samuel and Zoe. And to continuing strong bloodlines for generations to come. An uncomfortable silence followed. I took a long sip of water, feeling scrutinized. Christopher collects genealogy records, Samuel explained hastily. He's been working on our family tree. Exactly, Christopher nodded, his eyes never leaving Zoe. Some branches are stronger than others. Some bear fruit while others remain barren. Grace placed her hand over mine in a gesture that felt more possessive than comforting. Not everyone is meant to carry on family names, dear. Sometimes we must accept nature's limitations. My cheeks burned. The implication hung in the air like a fog. Samuel studied his plate, refusing to meet my eyes. Later that night, I soaked in our villa's outdoor bathtub, trying to wash away the discomfort of dinner. Maybe I was overreacting. Perhaps vacation stress was making me paranoid. Samuel entered the bathroom, searching through his toiletries. Are you enjoying yourself? I asked, desperate for reassurance. Sure, he replied distractedly. Zoe found this amazing night market. We might check it out tomorrow. I'd love to join you, I said, sitting up in the tub. Samuel hesitated. It's pretty far. You'd hate the scooter ride. He kissed my forehead. Besides, you have that spa treatment, remember? I didn't, but I nodded anyway. Samuel dropped his shorts into the laundry basket and a folded paper fell from his pocket. After he left, I retrieved it, a receipt from a local boutique. The item listed, white ceremonial dress, custom fitting. The price made my stomach clench. Why would Samuel buy a white dress? And why keep it secret? An image flashed in my mind. Zoe trying on a flowing white dress while my husband watched appreciatively. I pushed the thought away. There had to be a reasonable explanation. The next day, I found Samuel and Zoe huddled together in the resort's garden. They sprang apart when they noticed me approaching. Just showing Samuel some photography techniques, Zoe explained, quickly tucking her phone away. Can I see? I asked, reaching for her phone. Battery died, she replied too quickly. I'll show you later. That afternoon, Grace cornered me as I returned from a solitary walk along the beach. Madison, dear, I've been meaning to talk to you. Her voice dripped with false concern. Samuel seems troubled lately. Have you noticed? We're working through some things, I replied cautiously. 3 years is a long time to wait for certain developments. Her eyes dropped meaningfully to my midsection. Men have needs. Family needs. Sometimes we must be realistic about what we can and cannot provide. Before I could respond, Zoe appeared around the corner. Grace's expression immediately transformed. There you are, sunshine. I was just telling the boutique attendant about your dress. They'll have it ready tomorrow morning. Zoe shot Grace a warning look before smiling tightly at me. Just a souvenir. Nothing special. That evening, I searched our villa while Samuel showered. No white dress. No explanation for the receipt. Just more questions and a growing knot in my stomach. As I closed Samuel's suitcase, my sister's laughter drifted through our open window. I moved to the balcony and spotted Zoe below on her phone. It's all working out perfectly, she was saying. She has no idea. 3 more days and it'll be done. I stepped back into the shadows, my heart pounding. The puzzle pieces were aligning into a picture I didn't want to see. But the shadows in paradise were growing longer, and I could no longer pretend they weren't there. Sleep evaded me that night. I tossed and turned while Samuel slept peacefully beside me, wondering what 3 more days meant. What was being planned behind my back? The next morning, I put on a bright smile and suggested a group dinner at the resort's acclaimed cliffside restaurant. Wonderful idea. Grace exclaimed with unexpected enthusiasm. We should celebrate being together in this beautiful place. Samuel seemed nervous when I mentioned the dinner plans, checking his phone repeatedly throughout the day. I caught him whispering urgently to Zoe by the pool, their conversation ending abruptly when they noticed me approaching. Just discussing photography angles, Zoe explained with a practiced smile. The lighting at sunset is tricky. The restaurant was spectacular, perched on a cliff with waves crashing below and lanterns casting a golden glow across the terrace. I'd spent extra on a private corner table with panoramic ocean views. In another life, this would have been the romantic highlight of my trip with Samuel. Instead, I sat at one end of the table while Zoe occupied the seat beside my husband, showing him something on her phone that made him nod with approval. Grace and Christopher completed our party, both dressed formally as though attending a special occasion rather than a casual vacation dinner. "You look lovely tonight, Zoe," Grace commented, ignoring my new dress that had cost nearly a week's bakery profits. "That color brings out your eyes." "Thank you," Zoe replied, smoothing her hair. "I've been taking better care of myself lately." New chapter, new me. The server brought our appetizers, delicate rice paper rolls and seared scallops. As we ate, I noticed Christopher watching Samuel and Zoe with an expression of quiet satisfaction. Grace kept refilling my wine glass while barely touching her own. "Madison," Grace said suddenly, "I've been meaning to ask. Have you and Samuel considered adoption?" The question landed like a stone in still water. It's just that 3 years is quite some time. Samuel choked on his water. "Mom, not now." "What?" "It's a perfectly reasonable question," Grace continued, undeterred. "Family continuity matters. The blessing of children shouldn't be denied because of—" She glanced at me. "Unfortunate circumstances." The table fell silent. I felt my cheeks burning as all eyes turned to me. "Our family planning isn't dinner conversation," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Of course," Grace nodded, turning to Zoe with a knowing smile. "Some women are simply more naturally suited to motherhood. You can see it in their glow." Zoe at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, staring down at her plate. "Zoe would make a wonderful mother," Christopher added, raising his glass. "Young, healthy, fertile stock. That's what builds strong family lines." I set down my fork, appetite vanishing. "Excuse me." Samuel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden deck. "I need some air." Without meeting my eyes, he strode away from the table toward the garden path that led back to the resort grounds. Grace patted my hand. "He's sensitive about these matters. Let him be." Something in her tone, patronizing, almost triumphant, sparked a fire in me. I'd spent 3 years being patient, understanding, supportive. I'd worked double shifts to pay for this trip while my husband found himself. I deserved answers. "I should check on him," I said, placing my napkin beside my barely touched dinner. "Let him have space," Zoe interjected quickly. "He'll come back when he's ready." I smiled tightly. "I need some air too." The garden path wound through tropical flowers and towering palms, softly lit by ground lanterns. Samuel was nowhere in sight. Instead of returning to our villa, I followed a hunch and took the path toward the resort's farthest end, where I'd noticed a small building during our orientation tour. The night air was heavy with jasmine and salt spray as I moved quietly along the stone walkway. Crickets chirped around me while distant music from the resort's bar faded behind. I removed my heeled sandals, carrying them to move silently across the manicured lawn. A flicker of light caught my attention, candlelight glowing from a small structure nestled among flowering plumeria trees. The resort's chapel, used for weddings and vow renewals, supposedly closed at sunset according to the information packet. As I approached, voices drifted through the humid air. I recognized Samuel's deeper tones, followed by another voice that sent ice through my veins, Zoe's laugh, intimate and familiar in a way that shouldn't exist between my husband and my sister. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slipped between fragrant bushes, approaching a side window of the chapel. The glass was partially open, allowing the island breeze to carry their words clearly to where I stood frozen. "The flowers should be arranged like this," came another voice, a local woman I didn't recognize. "Traditional for blessing ceremonies." "It's perfect," Zoe replied. "Just what we discussed." I inched closer, careful to remain hidden in the shadows. Through the window, the chapel interior glowed with dozens of candles. Flower arrangements in white and gold adorned a small altar. And there, in the center of it all, stood my sister in a flowing white dress, holding hands with my husband. The white dress from the receipt. The secret meetings. The 3-day countdown. It all clicked into horrible focus. "The rings will be blessed here," the local woman explained, pointing to a small table. Then the binding ceremony. Samuel nodded, looking more engaged than I'd seen him in months. And legally? Will this be recognized back home? Your lawyer confirmed everything, came another voice from a corner I couldn't see clearly. Grace. Once papers are filed, it's perfectly legal in your state. My lungs seemed to collapse. They were planning a wedding. My husband and my sister. With his parents' blessing and support. Does she know? Samuel asked suddenly, his voice tight with nervous energy. Madison's been asking questions. Zoe squeezed his hand, her face softening with what looked disturbingly like pity. Relax. She insisted on this trip. She's too naive to connect the dots. Grace stepped into view, adjusting a flower in Zoe's hair. She won't suspect a thing. The poor dear is so desperate to please you, Samuel. So eager to save a marriage that was doomed from the start. My mother-in-law chuckled, the sound slicing through me like a blade. Once it's done, she'll keep paying the bills while you start your real family with someone who can actually give you children. I pressed my hand against my mouth to trap the sob building in my throat. 3 years of marriage. Countless sacrifices. Every dream and hope I'd built, shattered by the people I trusted most. I backed away from the chapel window, almost tripping over a decorative rock in the garden. My fingers trembled as I steadied myself against a tree trunk. The humid night air suddenly felt suffocating. 3 years of marriage reduced to a cruel joke. My husband rehearsing vows with my sister while I funded their betrayal. As I heard movement inside the chapel, I slipped deeper into the shadows. The wooden door creaked open, spilling golden candlelight onto the stone path. The ceremony will be perfect, the local woman said as she stepped outside. 3 days from now at sunset. Very auspicious timing. And Madison? Christopher's voice now. Where will she be? I've arranged a day-long spa package at the resort across the island, Grace replied. Paid for with her own credit card, of course. She'll be gone from morning until evening. Samuel laughed, a sound that once warmed my heart but now turned my blood cold. She'll probably thank you for being so thoughtful. That's Madison for you, always grateful for scraps. Their voices faded as they walked toward the main resort buildings. I remained frozen, processing the depth of their deception. Not just an affair but a wedding. Not just betrayal but a calculated plan to use me while building a new life behind my back. With mechanical movements, I made my way back to our villa. My mind raced with fragmented thoughts and memories reinterpreted through this new, painful lens. Samuel's disinterest in our fertility treatments. Grace's probing questions about my business finances. Zoe's sudden interest in family gatherings over the past year. I entered our villa silently, grateful to find it empty. Samuel would likely spend hours at the rehearsal. On the coffee table sat my laptop, the one I used to manage bakery accounts and our household finances. I opened it with newfound purpose, a strange calm settling over me. First I checked our joint accounts. As I suspected, Samuel had been systematically withdrawing small amounts. Never enough to raise alarms, but substantial when totaled. Nearly $12,000 over the past 8 months. Money that should have gone toward our future, diverted to fund his betrayal. My business accounts remained separate, thankfully. Samuel had access to household funds but not my bakery accounts, a boundary he'd once called unnecessarily cautious. Now it seemed like rare foresight. I moved to our travel itinerary folder, containing all our Bali reservations. Each booking, from flights to activities, had been made through my accounts, with confirmation emails sent to my address. I had paid for everything. My husband's betrayal, my sister's complicity, my in-laws' comfort, all funded by my bakery's success. With trembling fingers, I opened my email and began systematically working through each reservation. Our return flight, cancelled. The remaining 5 nights at the resort, cancelled. The day trips and experiences I'd planned, all cancelled. With each confirmation of cancellation, a strange weight lifted from my chest. I hesitated briefly over Grace and Christopher's flight information. They had insisted on booking their own travel, claiming airline points. I had their confirmation numbers only because Grace had accidentally forwarded them while asking for advice. I cancelled those too, a small smile forming as I imagined their faces when they discovered what I'd done. Next came our domestic connection flights within Indonesia. The ones Samuel and Zoe would need to reach their honeymoon destination after their surprise ceremony. Gone with a few keystrokes. As I worked, a notification popped up on my phone. A credit card alert for a charge at Eternal Bonds Wedding Chapel. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore, confident in my ignorance. I laughed quietly, a hollow sound in the empty villa. I paused at our shared photo album full of vacation pictures. Samuel and Zoe featured prominently, often with their heads bent together or standing suspiciously close. How had I been so blind? I downloaded all the photos, evidence of their behavior that might prove useful later, then deleted my access to the shared album. My phone buzzed with a text from Samuel. "Dinner went okay? Sorry for walking out. Needed space. With your sister talking about sights for tomorrow. Back late, don't wait up." The casual dismissal, the blatant lie. It should have hurt, but instead it fueled my resolve. I typed back, "No problem. Tired anyway. Sleep well." A perfect performance of the naive wife they believed me to be. I moved to my suitcase and began packing methodically, leaving behind anything Samuel had given me. The wedding ring, placed carefully on his pillow. The gold bracelet for our anniversary, left in the bathroom. The lingerie he'd surprised me with before the trip, stuffed in the trash. As I worked, I composed emails to my bakery assistant, my lawyer, and my bank. Brief, practical messages arranging for my return and the security of my assets. No emotional explanations, just necessary actions. I would tell the full story once safely home. I found flight availability for the next morning. A single seat on a red-eye to Singapore with connections home. The cost made me wince, but freedom was worth every penny. I booked it without hesitation. By midnight my plan was complete. I would leave before dawn, taking a resort shuttle to the airport. By the time they returned from breakfast, I would be airborne, and their carefully constructed fantasy would be collapsing around them. I showered, washing away tears I hadn't realized I'd shed. As the water cascaded over me, a strange sensation replaced my heartbreak. Something between relief and power. For years I had carried Samuel emotionally and financially. I had apologized for my infertility as though it were a moral failing. I had worked myself to exhaustion earning their respect and love. No more. I dressed in comfortable travel clothes and lay on the couch, setting an alarm for 4 a.m. Sleep seemed impossible, but my body needed rest for the journey ahead. As I drifted off, Grace's mocking words echoed in my mind. She won't suspect a thing. How wrong they were. How terribly, catastrophically wrong. In the darkness of our villa, with the distant sound of waves crashing against Bali's shores, I made a promise to myself. They had underestimated me for the last time. The naive, supportive, endlessly giving Madison they thought they knew died tonight outside that chapel window. The woman who would board tomorrow's flight was someone else entirely. Someone they would soon learn to fear. My alarm jolted me awake at 4 a.m. For one disorienting moment, I reached across the couch expecting to find Samuel before reality crashed back. Moving silently through the pre-dawn darkness, I grabbed my packed suitcase and took one final look around the villa. The remains of my marriage lay scattered like debris after a storm. My wedding ring on Samuel's pillow, mementos abandoned, promises broken. I left no note. They deserved no explanation. The night manager raised an eyebrow at my early departure but asked no questions when I requested a taxi. Family emergency, I offered simply. He nodded sympathetically, unaware that my family was the emergency I was fleeing. Dawn painted the sky in watercolor pinks and golds as my taxi wound through sleeping villages toward the airport. Rice paddies and temples blurred past my window, beautiful sights I'd once hoped to share with a loving husband. Now they served as backdrop to my escape. At the airport, I watched sleepy travelers dragging suitcases and clutching coffee cups. Normal people living normal lives without the floor collapsing beneath them. I envied their ordinary problems. "Ticket for Madison Parker?" the airline attendant asked, her cheerful demeanor a stark contrast to my hollow feeling. "Yes," I replied, then paused. Parker was Samuel's last name. Actually, it's Madison Reynolds now. My maiden name felt foreign on my tongue after 3 years, but also right. A reclamation. The flight to Singapore passed in a fog of exhaustion and intermittent tears. I switched my phone to airplane mode after sending one text to my assistant Jenny. Family emergency. Home tomorrow. Please handle Wednesday's orders. No details. No drama. Those would come later. In the sterile cleanliness of Singapore's airport during my 6-hour layover, I found a quiet corner in a business lounge and began making calls. First to my bank, requesting a freeze on joint accounts and new security protocols for my business finances. Next to a locksmith in Springfield, arranging for locks to be changed at both my bakery and home. The third call was hardest, to my parents. Madison, is everything okay? It's the middle of the night here, my mother's sleep-laden voice answered. No, Mom, it's not. My voice cracked for the first time since discovering the betrayal. I'm coming home early. Alone. What happened? Where's Samuel? And Zoe? They're still in Bali. Planning their wedding. The silence on the other end was deafening. Mom, Samuel and Zoe were going to get married behind my back. They've been planning it for months. My mother's shocked gasp gave way to righteous anger. By the time I boarded my connecting flight to Tokyo, my parents had already contacted their lawyer and cleared their guest room for my return. The international dateline meant I arrived home almost a full day after leaving Bali, exhausted but clear-headed. Jenny met me at the airport, her concerned expression softening when I emerged from the terminal. You look terrible, she said bluntly, taking my suitcase. I feel terrible, I admitted as we walked to her car. But I'll be better. The next morning, while Samuel and his co-conspirators were likely discovering my disappearance, I sat in a lawyer's office downtown. Mr. Abernathy, my parents' attorney for 20 years, listened without interruption as I outlined the betrayal and my financial concerns. They've significantly underestimated you, he noted, sliding divorce papers across his desk. We'll file these immediately, freeze joint assets, and document the fraud Samuel's been committing by diverting your funds. I want it clean and quick, I insisted. No dragging things out. Based on what you've told me, we have grounds for an expedited process given the documented infidelity and financial deception. I signed my name with steady hands, formally ending my marriage in black ink against white paper. The bakery became my sanctuary. While my personal life imploded, Sweet Crumbs thrived. I threw myself into creating new recipes, extending business hours, and finalizing a small business loan I'd been considering for an expansion. Work that had once seemed exhausting now energized me. This was mine, built with my hands, unsullied by betrayal. 8 days after my escape from Bali, my phone exploded with notifications. They were home. Madison, where are you? The house locks are changed. Samuel's text message contained no apology, just entitled confusion. Madison, this is childish. We need to talk. This one came an hour later. I forwarded both to my lawyer without responding. Grace was next, her message breathtaking in its audacity. Madison, dear, I understand you're upset, but this behavior is unacceptable. Christopher has severe jet lag after our ordeal and we had to pay thousands for new flights. Samuel needs his things from the house. My response was brief. All communication through my attorney. Contact information has been emailed to you. Zoe tried calling 17 times before leaving a voicemail that oscillated between tears and anger. Maddie, you don't understand. It wasn't what it looked like. Please call me back. You're still my sister. I deleted it without finishing. News travels fast in small towns. Within days, everyone knew some version of the story. I chose dignity over drama, confirming only that Samuel and I had separated due to infidelity, offering no sordid details or accusations. The community rallied around me. Orders increased, regulars brought flowers, and 3 local businesses approached me about supplying their cafes with baked goods. 2 weeks after my return, I received divorce papers with Samuel's signature, along with a settlement offer far below what my lawyer advised was fair. His accompanying letter claimed financial hardship due to unexpected travel expenses and requested leniency. I declined both. The final divorce was granted in record time, helped by the mountain of evidence and Samuel's reluctance to appear in court where his actions would become public record. I kept my bakery, my house, and my dignity. He kept his new wife, his emptied bank accounts, and his reputation as the town's most despised cheater. 1 month to the day after Bali, I walked into Dr. Henderson's fertility clinic for an appointment I'd cancelled 3 times while married to Samuel. I'm here to discuss my options, I told the kind-faced doctor. As a single woman, Of course, she nodded, pulling out brochures on sperm donors and IVF treatments. Your blockage doesn't mean motherhood is impossible, just that you'll need assistance. For the first time in years, I imagined a future entirely of my choosing. Perhaps a child of my own, perhaps adoption, perhaps simply a life filled with my bakery friends, and the freedom to define family on my terms. Last week, Zoe and Samuel announced their pregnancy on social media. Mutual friends sent screenshots concerned about my reaction. They were surprised when I responded with genuine neutrality. I'm fine, I told my mother over Sunday dinner. Truly fine. And I was. The woman who returned from Bali wasn't the same one who planned that trip with naive hope. I had learned that strength doesn't come from enduring betrayal. It comes from walking away and rebuilding something better. The bakery expansion opens next month. The nursery room in my house remains an empty possibility, not a painful reminder. Me. I'm no longer defined by what I couldn't give Samuel, but by what I chose to give myself: respect, honesty, and the power to write my own story.